Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're proudly coming to you through the ever-expanding X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, and can also be found on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring Don't Have a Wasted Life. While we'd like to think we're at the helm of our own lives, and the sad reality is, rather than being self-directed, many of us are controlled by fear. Living in terror of lack, most of our focus is on earning enough money to be safe and provided for in our latter years. One wouldn't want to starve alone in the dark. We're taught from an early age to always take the safe route, to be responsible, to save for the future rather than live for the moment. While some semblance of reason and planning is not only advisable but necessary, we also need courage, unconventionality, and spontaneity in order to really live. Our creativity and genius lies in the untamed heart, not in mental planning or careful strategizing based on what's gone before. Countries were founded by adventurers, yet the majority of us play it safe. Shackled to jobs, relationships, and lives that bore us, we get thrills in front of a television watching others take risks and succeed. Watching others really live. We content ourselves with the thought that stories and characters are just fictitious, meant for entertainment purposes only. Then there are those few exceptional real-life individuals who, by their very nature, break from the norm. They're the mavericks, the outlandish ones, that live life by their own rules and make a mark in the world. They're the adventurers who live to the fullest and accomplish amazing things, while the rest of us squander our time focused on mundania, planning and saving to retire, and then to die. The courageous, exceptional ones don't buy into programmed viewpoints and beliefs, but seek the deeper meaning in all things. In so doing, they step out from under the yoke of the system and the belief of the majority. They recognize that money and lack are illusions designed to control through fear. There's a well-kept secret. We are co-creators of our reality. As long as we live in fear of lack, that's exactly what we're going to create. If, however, we find the courage to embrace independent thought, we can access our ability to dream a future and then create it. If instead of playing lip service to the harsh realities of life, we stop and ask ourselves, but what if? Then we open the doors to our imagination and the ability to create. Through embracing curiosity and following our joy, each of us can break free of the fear trap. The status quo has dulled our minds and stifled our spirit. Many believe we have no more value than our material possessions. Yet we're spiritual beings made in the image of God, our spirits reaching to the edge of the universe and beyond. The only thing standing between us and our true potential is programming and fear. Like cattle complacently munching grain in the feedlot, lulled into a false sense of security by abundant food, only to be led to the slaughter, we condemn ourselves to unremarkable lives. Why settle for the mundane when we can embrace our genius? To be safe? It doesn't look safe to me. It looks like a feedlot. It looks like a wasted life. Our guest this hour, Ralph White, author of The Jeweled Highway on the Quest for a Life of Meaning, is co-founder and current creative director of the New York Open Center, America's leading urban institute of holistic learning. The Open has presented the major writers and speakers in the fields of wellness, social ecological change, inner development, world spiritual traditions, art, and creativity for over 27 years. Ralph is an international speaker on spirituality, consciousness, and the history of Western tradition, editor of the award-winning Lapis magazine, and taught the first full accredited course in holistic thinking and learning at New York University. After this commercial break, I'll introduce Ralph, and together we'll explore the many paths to living a life of meaning. So don't go away. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found at our website, thescienceofmagic.net. The Science of Magic is produced by Relmar McConnell Media Company, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Though the world seems in turmoil around us, let's not lose our way. The stars still shine down, blessing us with their light. The sun rises every morning, chasing away the cold and darkness. There are good people of service in this world. We have much to be grateful for as we're wrapped in the arms of all of God's creation. This is Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas. I hope your holiday is filled with comfort and joy as you're surrounded by those you love. I'd like to thank all of you for being our loyal listeners on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and for joining us on this grand adventure called life. As the New Year's dawns, let us all stand in truth as we embrace peace. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Ralph White, author of The Jeweled Highway. Ralph, after completing a degree in American Studies at the University of Sussex, came to the United States from Britain. He was a program director for Omega Institute of Holistic Studies in Rhinebeck. He's taught and lectured in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, Russia, and Poland. His website is ralphwhite.net. Ralph, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Well, it's my pleasure. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. So let's start out with, what do you consider a life of meaning to be?
Well, yeah, let's get stuck into the big questions. What do I consider a life? I guess it's a life that is fulfilling, that speaks to your own deepest values, where you're not just in that feedlot that you were mentioning in your preface there, where you have the chance to make a mark on the world, and you have a chance to express your deepest vision and values in a way that is significant and conforms to whatever creative objectives you may have in mind. And I think that's one way to approach it.
You know, it seems there's always something that drives us to a quest for meaning. What was yours?
Sorry, I missed that. We just lost. Drives me to what?
It seems there's always something that drives us for a quest of meaning. What
drives
was your...
us for a quest.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, what drove me? Well, I think from an early age, from just being a child, a 9 or 10-year-old, I did always have those basic questions: what are we doing here? What is the point of it all? And is it all just to grow up, get a job, get married, and die? So I was always looking for some kind of deeper purpose. And so for me, that involved the whole a quest, a spiritual path. So I think I had those deep existential questions that were in search of some kind of an answer. And that's what led me to the journeys, travels, activities, and so on that I've been involved in.
You know, it seems to me like there are those that have that driving urge behind them, and then there's others that really don't. Have you noticed that, and what do you think makes a difference?
Well, this is, some people would say it's genetics, wouldn't they? Other people would say that it is the nature of our individual souls. You can take all kinds of different positions. I personally would go more with the latter view. Mm-hmm. I think we all have different beings. You could argue that we all have different karma. And we are drawn to various paths and activities, or the answers to seeking the answers to various questions, according to our own innate predisposition and to our own destiny.
Mm. So, have you personally found meaning?
Oh yeah, yes, I can say I can't complain. Yes, I mean, of course, I've been involved in the whole realm of holistic learning through most of my adult life. But yes, the first 26 years of my life, particularly, after leaving home at 18 until about 26, those 7 or 8 years there were a real quest for me on multiple levels: intellectual, spiritual, geographical. But I did arrive at a conviction that we do live in a spiritual world, and not only that, but that our society has been and continues to be in large measure, although we're seeing positive signs in some areas, intent upon a self-destructive bent. And that it is essential to create a more holistic and ecological world and society. So my personal sense of meaning has come from contributing to that larger vision of a transformed culture bit by bit. And it's been very gratifying to see that many positive elements are happening as part of that. And for me, on a more personal, subjective level, I would say, yes, I mean, I've come to a spiritual view of the world, which has been with me now for a long time, over 40 years. And it ain't going anywhere, and that's the way I've lived my life. It's provided me meaning, coherence, and direction, and I'm likely to stick with it for the rest of this life.
That's something to look forward to instead of just retiring and dying, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So have you found that meaning evolves over time?
Meaning evolves. Well, I could say fresh levels of meaning appear. You might begin with a meaning, just finding a sense of meaning in terms of your own personal paths through life, or who you are as a human being, or who you are as a spiritual being. But then the more you get involved in different initiatives and activities, then you can find meaning through all of those, whether it's social, ecological, cultural, whatever domain you may apply yourself to, and whatever initiatives you're seeking to foster, then you can find great meaning through the impact that they have on the world. So let's say through the New York Open Center, we've been fortunate in being able to serve or provide, hopefully in many cases, beneficial or even life-transforming programs to over 300,000 people. So, yes, you could say that there's a fulfillment in doing that, or in doing this. I just came back from Iceland from a 21-year conference series I've done on some of the Western spiritual traditions that are half forgotten. I find great fulfillment in that. So, yes, I think meaning does become multidimensional the more we become engaged with the world.
The more we become engaged with the world, the more we become engaged with ourselves, and then it opens up our multidimensionality. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think stands between most of us and living a life of meaning?
Well, I think you put your finger on it there in the intro. I think a lot of people are, unfortunately, inhibited by fear. Inhibited by our cultural conditioning that life is about primarily the acquisition of material goods, or concerned with safety rather than being willing to take a chance. Of course, it depends on your life circumstances, but and you may simply be essential for you to put bread on the table and provide shelter for your family, and obviously that takes first priority, and you can find meaning in that. But if you have some of the basic things taken care of, as Abraham Maslow taught us many moons ago, there is that self-actualization dimension. And I think that's essential for many of us.
So what advice do you have for our listeners? Say they find they're one of those people that's kind of stuck in fear. How can they start to move out of that and find meaning?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, take a chance. I mean, just look inside your own heart and see, what would you really like to do? Do you have some unlived dream? Something you've always really wanted to do, but somehow haven't got round to? Do you really want to leave this world or even get through the next decade without at least having a shot at it, even if it doesn't work out? So I would say, look inside yourself, see what ambition in an egotistical way, but what desire to express yourself or to contribute to the world or whatever it may be that lives powerfully and maybe has lived inside you for a number of years or decades, and say, look, maybe it's the time to actually give it a whirl. Try it. Step outside the normal and do something fresh and new. Take a chance. Take a risk.
Boy, it's about risk, isn't it? You brought up something interesting about imagination and dreams. What do you think imagination and dreams have to do with engaging a life of meaning?
Well, from my perspective, the world of imagination and dreams would be a means through which the deeper aspects of our consciousness, the soul, to use familiar language there, they're a way through which the soul can speak to us in our everyday personality and our everyday awareness. So whether it is an active imagination, a daydream, as it were, or whether it is literally a dream that you wake up with, it could be both or either. But I think they are harbingers of elements that are going on at a deeper level of our psyche. And I think if we pay attention to them, I'm somebody who really had no choice in these areas. Those feelings were so powerful in me, I could never have just bought into the established path through life, if that really were, and in terms of just conventional job, family, career, etc. That was never going to be sufficient to me. But I think for many people, it depends what your obligations are, but if you've reached the point in your life where you can actually step outside the box, then give it a try. And I think the intimations, the feelings, the consistent yearnings that live within the soul are a very strong guide to how to do that.
Do you think we come with, a programming, if you will, from when we decided to come in this time that kind of drives us in this direction? Is that part of where these dreams and promptings are coming from?
Yeah, my personal view is yes. I do think that is the case. I think we do come into this world with a certain overall pattern of destiny. Perhaps not in all the details, but a certain soul yearning that matures and unfolds in us as we grow older, and that provides us with a certain temperament, a certain predisposition, a certain way to respond to factors and experiences in the world. That is my view. I don't think we are just the proverbial tabula rasa, the blank slate, as materialistic thinkers and psychologists would present it. In my experience, that is not the case. I think we do all have a different soul and a different destiny, and we come in with those predispositions.
Do you think there's past lives involved in this?
I do personally. I mean, I wouldn't go trying to convince anybody of it. I think that's something that we all have to come to individually. But yes, we in the West tend to assume that it's only, what should we say, New Age space cadets and so on who could buy into such a sort of a ludicrous view of reality. But it's actually a very culturally arrogant view, because we have hundreds of millions of Buddhists, Hindus, and so on throughout the world who who have subscribed to this worldview for millennia. So there's nothing particularly insane or crazy about it. It's actually, I don't know if anybody's ever done the statistics, but it's a very significant portion of the world's population that would subscribe to a view of reincarnation.
Yeah, it's amazing. My son spoke to me when he was 4 years old of a past life he'd had, just as a matter of fact, and I went, whoa, that opened my eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So on the other side, we're going to have to take a break here pretty soon, but on the other side, I'd really like to get deeper into, past lives, purpose, and possible soul teams. Who did we come to work with? Did we come to work with someone? How do we recognize them? You game for that?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Hey, Ralph and I will return to our discussion after this short break. We're coming to you through the land of leading-edge paranormal broadcasting, the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Don't miss the other fine shows and hosts on xzbn.net. You're listening to The Science of Magic, thescienceofmagic.net. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. We will be back, so don't you go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Ralph White, author of The Jeweled Highway, On the Quest for a Life of Meaning. Ralph, before we went into the break, we were talking about past lives, what we decide to come in with each time as far as our drive to accomplish something. And then I added the factor of, are there people that we've kind of made an agreement to work with lifetime to lifetime? So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I've certainly had a sense of familiarity. In my book, I describe an experience I had when I came across the Findhorn community, now an eco village in the north of Scotland, back in the mid-70s. And I had that sense one dark, snowy night in 1975 of entering the community center there and having an immediate sense of familiarity. Even though of the 150 or so people in that room, I had only ever laid eyes on one before. And here we are 40 years or whatever it is later, and I'm still very close friends with many of the people from that time. So they're definitely people that I've had a soul connection with, and I intuited it the moment I encountered them en masse. So I do think that we have that kind of experience. Yes, I mean, I've had certain, relationships, personal relationships that definitely had a sort of karmic flavor to them, where we were sort of irresistibly drawn to each other. So, yes, I think when it comes to engaging in a specific important initiative, for instance, to bring something of value and new into the world, I think we can gather around us, so we can be drawn into a kind of vortex. And certain people who resonate with that, who may have some deeper soul or karmic connection, can become part of that. So Yeah, I've certainly I have lifelong friends with whom I have a profound soul connection. I would say that seems to me the chances are very good that it stems from previous lifetimes together.
You know, you said something that really struck with me, and that's that synergy or resonance. So when you get people together that have like purpose, it's like with a sound wave. If you sound a sound wave at a particular volume in a sound chamber, and you add another sound wave identical to it at the same volume, you get more than twice the volume as a result. And isn't it that way when you're working with people that you have synergy with, and yet if you're working with people that are dissonant to you, it kind of has the opposite effect?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely the case. I mentioned this 20-year series of esoteric quests, as we call them, these conferences on the Western esoteric tradition that I've been doing. There's a team of three of us at the heart of that, and we have just an outstanding synergy between us. We complement each other so well, and we are able to accomplish far more when the three of us work together around a shared goal that we all believe in than we ever would be able to do just working separately. So yes, and I think it's this, and that synergistic phenomenon is especially powerful with people that you really do have a deep soul connection with. And whenever I can't speak so well, I've certainly been in situations where I didn't feel a connection with the people I was around, and that is definitely counterproductive. I can say that definitively.
Yeah, that dissonance is no fun at all, is it?
No.
You should have done a lot of things in your bio and elsewhere. I've noticed that you've really accomplished a lot and done a lot of different things. What drove you to engage in so many different areas?
Well, I just did with whatever came up next. I mean, by the time I was 26, I'd arrived at a holistic and ecological and spiritual worldview. So I was looking for something to do. I could also see that Western industrial civilization was fundamentally on a misguided track. It was deeply damaging our souls in many ways, and it was deeply damaging the environment and the biosphere as well, and that we had to create an alternative. So having had that insight, which came out of, spending a year or two in South America in the Andes, and then seeing Western civilization again with fresh eyes, it's a question of where do you begin? And what attracted me, say, to the Findhorn community in Echo Village up in the north of Scotland was that it saw itself as a center of demonstration, that you can actually demonstrate that it is possible to live together in a largely harmonious way and in a largely harmonious relationship to nature. So I like the idea of being part of an initiative that demonstrates that to the world rather than just talking about it. And then, when I was program director of Omega Institute for Holistic Studies in upstate New York in Rhinebeck, that was something that somehow fell into my lap. It was I describe more in more detail in the book how that actually happened. It certainly wasn't something I was planning on. There was no way to plan on it. It was just a fate, destiny, whatever you are, karma, whatever you care to call these things. But that just seemed really important, that we should have a major center for holistic consciousness in the eastern United States that could bring in top quality presenters and serve as a real vortex for consciousness change. And similarly, when another set of synchronicities led me to start the New York Open Center in downtown Manhattan back in 1984. That was just a series. I met this person and that person, the door opened in that direction. And, of course, the conventional wisdom 30-odd years ago was that something like that would never work in New York, that it was some kind of daydream, get out of here. This is the real world. In New York 30-odd years ago really was a very, should we say, a very chaotic and dangerous, out of control place. And so people really thought it was not feasible to do something like that. Maybe California, maybe Hawaii, but not New York at that time. And yet we've seen that that's certainly not the case. And in fact, New York really needed it. And there were scores of thousands of people who were thrilled that at last New York City had a major center for consciousness. In a sense, I've done what life has put in front of me. Sometimes I've had my own impulses, like when I hitchhiked to Machu Picchu when I was 23, I saw that picture of it and I just had an immediate yearning to go. And so that was something that just seeing that image of Machu Picchu on television all those years ago just galvanized in me a soul impulse, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. You know what I'm seeing here, Ralph, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the difference between you and a lot of other people is A, you recognize the synchronicities, the spontaneous promptings, and B, you act on them. How can somebody start to recognize those?
Well, how can somebody start to recognize those? You could, I'm not sure I have any especially insightful answer around this, but it's things like meditation. It's things about having some kind of practice where you can slow down enough, where you're not, it doesn't have to be meditation per se, it could be just long walks. It could be taking the dog for a walk by the riverside, but just something that takes you into a more contemplative state, where you can hear your inner promptings, where you're not so caught up in the rush and the stress. And of course, now for us today in the digital world, the relentless barrage of data that we get every time through our cell phones and our iPads and our laptops, and the constant information that comes at us. I think this is why we're seeing a great rise in the interest in retreats for people. People are desperate to get away, have some quiet time, some silence, slow down, and listen to what their own heart is telling them. So, that's what comes to mind for me, just to try to find periods of time, even if it's not a daily meditation practice, but just something, go to the mountains or spend a couple of weeks by the ocean if you can, and give yourself the time and the space for the deep soul yearnings that live in your heart to become accessible to you.
So time and space for your soul yearnings to emerge, and then you can recognize them. We just keep ourselves too busy and distracted by the mundane.
Well, we do, and of course we're living in a culture that is increasingly frenetic, where we're constantly bombarded with information, so I think it's especially important that we do this at this time.
It really is. And why do you think it's more important at this particular time? What do you think is going on?
I think in a way where, if you look at the whole question of technology, we are faced with a choice, with a struggle, really. Are the machines and computers going to mechanize us, or are we going to humanize and spiritualize them? Or finding the right balance between those two things. I think there's a danger of us developing an overly mechanized consciousness, where people start to think there is no such phenomenon as the soul, that we're all just a mass of data, that we're just human computers, we're just sort of some wet hardware. And I think there is, a deeper danger, and it ties into all kinds of streams of materialistic thinking, whether it's materialistic science or materialistic philosophy, that would argue that there is no such thing as the soul, that all consciousness are derives simply from the brain. So I think it is important, I think it's one of the reasons I do these programs on spirituality, on the Western esoteric tradition, to see that there's a long, distinguished, beautiful, and brilliant tradition of understanding of deeper aspects of consciousness, the mind and the soul. So I think that's one of the factors that's going on right now. And of course, we all, the world is moving in a desperate direction, whether it's global warming or wherever it may be. We are in need of some profound changes here. We can't just keep on going on business as usual. Global warming is the most visible and palpable dimension of it, but there are many other dimensions as well. So I think we're living in a time where more and more people need to wake up to the true values that live in their hearts and souls and start creating homes, societies, cultures, whatever it may be, that are reflective of what is needed in the world right now. A life and individuals and lives and communities that are in resonance and harmony with that larger reality.
It's such a beautiful point, Ralph, because, we can't go back to indigenous ways. There's just too darn many of us. Mm-hmm. And we can't go on like we are. So
Yeah.
really, we need something, that third option, and only the creativity of the individual is gonna come up with that. Don't you believe?
Yeah, yes, I do. I think it's up to each one of us. Somebody's not necessarily going to tap us on the shoulder and point us in the direction and say, go and do that. It's going to arise from within our own hearts and our own deepest feelings, and from our own intelligence and our own awareness of what we see going on in the world, and how we can be vehicles for healing and for love and hopefully for wisdom in the world.
Boy, there's no greater service, is there? And nothing has been more needed than that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So vehicles for love in the world. When we get back, I'd like to talk about how our Earth connection can help us be vehicles for love in the world.
Okay.
Ralph and I will be back shortly. You're listening to The Science of Magic, thescienceofmagic.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. We're brought to you by the leader in paranormal, spirituality, alternative health programming, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Don't miss the other fine shows on the X-Zone. Though the world seems in turmoil around us, let's not lose our way. The stars still shine down, blessing us with their light. The sun rises every morning, chasing away the cold and darkness. There are good people of service in this world. We have much to be grateful for as we're wrapped in the arms of all of God's creation. This is Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas. I hope your holiday is filled with comfort and joy as you're surrounded by those you love. I'd like to thank all of you for being our loyal listeners on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and for joining us on this grand adventure called life. As the New Year's dawns, let us all stand in truth as we embrace peace. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. And one of those gifted people of service is our guest this hour, Ralph White. He's the author of The Jeweled Highway, On the Quest for a Life of Meaning. Ralph, before we went into the break, we were talking about how we can make, a connection with the earth in order to create a third option for our future.
Hello?
Ralph? Oh, we must have broken
Sorry,
up.
I lost you there for a second.
Okay. I was saying
Didn't hear the second half of the question.
Okay. Yeah. We were talking about how making a connection with the earth and with each other and living lives of meaning, we can possibly create a third option for the future of the planet. I wondered if you would speak to that for me.
Well, I think this is the great challenge of our time, isn't it? I think there are multiple pointers, indicators that we are in a time of crisis, starting off with the environmental crisis. And it can't just be business as usual. I mean, I remember when I was a boy, an adolescent in the north of England, in the places where the Industrial Revolution began, with the chimneys pouring smoke into and a whole blackened city covered in 150 years' worth of soot. We've come a long way from there. And so I think, from my point of view anyway, that the science is overwhelming about the necessity for us to do something about global warming and to move towards renewable energy sources and away from the massive emphasis upon coal, oil, and gas. So that's one dimension. I think that the other dimension is the spiritual crisis of our time. Why are there so many people listening to your show or coming to the Open Center, regardless of their own particular religious or philosophical backgrounds? I think people are feeling a huge sense of an existential need to find something, a different way to live together, a different way to be in the world, a different relationship with their own inner selves. So yes, I think it's important that when we do find a spiritual path that speaks to us, that from my point of view, that it's not just about us. It's not about my personal growth, my practice, whatever it may be. It's what do we, let's say we arrive at that, and we arrive at certain insights, but then we have to bring it back to the world. As Joseph Campbell said in The Hero's Journey, you may travel off and have many new insights, but you have to bring it back to fructify the culture. And I think each of us has to find our own individual way. We all have different gifts and talents. What individual path can we find to make the maximum possible contribution to create this more holistic and ecological world? So yes, to me that's a high imperative. And it's those kinds of values can be brought into almost every sphere of human endeavor.
Mm. When you were talking about, new solutions, that's not coal and oil and this and that, over the years, I've heard of a lot of and been aware of a lot of very innovative new solutions that get squashed. Do you think our current society and systems are diametrically opposed to the creativity and the independent thinking that's going to create the third option?
Well, there's a lot of it that isn't helpful, isn't it? I mean, it requires an effort to extract ourselves from the morass of conventional opinion. And it's very easy just to be conditioned rather than to think independently. I'm not sure, I think thinking independently, thinking critically, no, I don't mean gratuitously critically, but where it's merited, being an independent thinker, essentially, thinking for yourself, arriving at your own conclusions, following your own values. I do think that is essential. And in this age of mass media, it's easier and easier just to be suckered into it. And I think with the economic stresses for so many people today as well, if they're working two jobs just to put bread on the table for their family, then they're exhausted. They have less and less time for this. So I do think there are many factors in our current society that stand in the way of this, but then it's up to us to get on top of whatever it is that would hold us back, and to make our creative contributions, because there's no question that the world is in many ways in a very difficult situation, and we have to move in a healthier way.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Before we get too far into this last segment, would you mind sharing with the listeners where they can find your books and services?
Yes, you can find my book, The Jeweled Highway. I guess the easiest for most listeners would be to go to Amazon.com. Just The Jeweled Highway, spelt the American way with one L, and by Ralph White. You could also go to the publisher's website, Divine Arts Media. The book is available there, too. You may also have it at your local bookstore. Let me also say my own website, ralphwhite.net. And then these esoteric quests that I've been doing for 21 years, the website there, esotericquest.org. Our next one will be in the Western Isles of Scotland next August. And then there's the Open Center website too, opencenter.org. So I think those are all good ways to get in touch with my work.
Well, thank you so much. Talk to me about spiritual awakening. How do you define it?
How do I define spiritual awakening?
See, I'm just giving you the tough ones.
Well, I've never really thought of trying to define it before, but now that you ask the question, what would you say? It's a progressive expansion of the heart, I would say. It's a calming of consciousness, an opening of the heart, a sense that a living, palpable sense that we are part of a much greater reality than we think we are. It's about being, less absorbed with your own egotistical needs and pursuits, and hopefully more engaged with service to humanity or service to the planet. And I would say it goes with, ideally, not every day, but on a good day, it goes with an increased sense of calm and a tranquility and a peace. I mean, these are the objectives, of course. We all, certainly including me, become furious and disturbed, especially living in New York City for 30 years. But, yeah, I think it's helpful to have some kind of practice. I mean, I've been meditating for a long time, so it's helpful to me. But there are so many, of course, mindfulness. People tend to think it's synonymous with meditation, and it's a wonderful thing, but there are many different approaches to meditation. But for some people, it could be dream work. For some people, it can be more shamanic kind of things, sweat lodges and the like. There are countless different paths towards growth. And it's reading profound material. I mean, for me, one of the great teachers who remains relatively unread is the great Rudolf Steiner, who I think, when it comes to some of these things we've been discussing today, karma, reincarnation, and so on, the journey of the soul after death or between death and rebirth, there's an unbelievable treasure trove of wisdom there with Steiner, even though people today tend to associate him with Waldorf schools and biodynamic agriculture. He certainly left a phenomenal holistic legacy. I certainly would recommend that people look into that. I think he's certainly been a great source of wisdom for me, and it stood the test of time. I've been deeply interested in science for 30 years. So I think, yes, the reading spiritual books, and doing what you can to read in a meditative way. So if you come across a phrase, just stay with it. Let it sink into you. Don't necessarily rush on. Certainly don't speed read a book. Reading Steiner is certainly a contemplative experience where there will be completely new thoughts that will come to you that you've never had before in your wildest dreams. That's a mark of a true spiritual teacher in my mind.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's what comes to mind.
So we have a couple minutes left. What advice do you have for us? We're trying to live within a system and have a life of meaning, and yet change the very system we're living in. What do you think we can do? What are the first steps for each individual to be able to participate in that process?
Well, maybe the first step is really just to get to know yourself, first of all. What do you really think? What do you really feel? What are the real impulses of will? What are the intentions that live in your deep heart's core? So give yourself the time and the space to tune into that, whether it's paying attention to your dreams in the morning or just what are these soul promptings that maybe you've been ignoring for years, but that keep on nagging in there inside of you. Maybe nagging's the wrong word, but they keep on being there, speaking to you, and you keep pushing them aside because you don't have the time, you don't have the energy, or whatever it may be. So I think the more we can get in touch with what our inner soul promptings are, I think that's a great first step. And then, as I was saying earlier in the show, you just take a risk, try to bring something you truly believe in into manifestation. Of course, you don't have to initiate something. You may be joining something. You may be, helping with a natural food co-op, or helping with, an organic farm, or whatever it may be. But I think especially at this time when the larger political situation might be a little out of control, but we can always focus on local initiatives, regardless of the larger political context that we find ourselves in. So, yeah, I think just get to know yourself better and then act out of what lives, what you are most strongly drawn to, and believe in the values that dwell in your heart, and do what you can to find courage to express them in the world.
That's beautiful. Ralph, thank you so much for being on the show with us. We're out of time, but it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Gwilda. I've enjoyed it. Appreciate what you do.
Thank you, dear. Our guest this hour has been Ralph White, author of The Jeweled Highway, on the quest for a life of meaning. His website, ralphwhite.net. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. Don't forget to join us next time on our next episode. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge and comforted with love as you live a life of meaning.
One people, one nation.